There are questions surrounding the Virginia Supreme Appellate Court and its findings about the Doctor Marshall Benton Taylor case. What part of the evidence did the upper court validate for its reasoning for its ruling? Why was this shocking? We will tell you what we think happened behind the closed doors, and why there are two factions through time split about what happened to Dr. Taylor after this point in history. Come along with us as we walk through the most shocking part of the Killing Rock Pound Gap Massacre so far. All aboard the Kentucky-Tennessee Living Time Machine. Please fasten your seatbelts and keep your arms and legs inside of the vehicle at all times. But to get going, we need your help. We still need to fire up that time machine to transport us. Please help us by clicking on the like, subscribe, and bell notification buttons down below. Not only does this fire up the time machine for our flight back in time, but it convinces the YouTube algorithm that we need a bigger vehicle to reach more people who love history as much as you do. Now, back to our story. The Pound Gap Massacre. Charles A. Johnson completes his book, A Narrative History of Wise County, Virginia, with Chapter 32, aptly naming it The Pound Massacre. While there could be several reasons for him ending the book with this chapter, we believe it has to do with the last 20 or so pages of the book. We also believe that, as soon as he decided to write the book, he began the process of acquiring all the documents he needed to complete this tale. In fact, in no certain words, Johnson tells us about the struggle he had to obtain the transcript of the trial. We also think that Johnson had several reasons for wanting to be as thorough as he could be while recounting this story. We think that after he obtained and reviewed the transcript, some of his reasons may have changed. We think that this may have led him to edit what he had already written prior to receiving the transcript. We believe that this is why he included items such as the rumor about, quote, old man Doc, unquote, abandoning his guard duty of Todd Hall to commit the massacre. He was leaving clues that something was wrong with the transcript he had received from the appellate court. The appellate court hearing. Almost nothing is known of the appellate trial of Dr. Taylor, and, as of this writing, we could only find two newspaper snippets about the appeal itself. The first being a two-sentence notification posted on December 9, 1892. This item only tells us that the Supreme Court Justice Richardson issued a stay of execution on December 8, 1892, and issued a preliminary court date for the last week of June, 1893. The hearing took place on either the 22nd or 23rd of June, and on July 6, 1893, the court issued a statement. This was printed in the Roanoke Times on July 7, 1893. Except there was no outcome. The appellate court had issued a decision on several cases that day. We know who each defendant was, and we are told how each of the 5 court justices voted on the case, and in some we are told why. But there is no vote on the Taylor case. The newspaper article simply says that the ruling of the lower court was affirmed. The reporter, W. F. Barnett, then does a recap of the crime Dr. Taylor was accused of. He states that there were 2 witnesses and, quote, it was the witness of the woman who will bring Taylor to justice, unquote. On this case, there are only 2 of the 5 justices mentioned. Judge Richardson, who dissented, and Chief Justice Fauntleroy, who affirmed the decision of the lower court. Behind closed doors. What we are about to tell you is pure speculation. However, we believe that this theory is confirmed in a newspaper article by W. F. Barnett and by Charles Johnson in his book. By what each of them says, or more to the point, by what each of them does not say. Sometime in late September or early October, the appellate court receives the appeal. 4 of the justices, including Chief Justice Fauntleroy, dismissed the appeal because there was no writ of exception attached to the appeal. We know this because Charles Johnson mentions the 12 exceptions to the trial 3 separate times in his chapter on the Pound Massacre. Yet, when he receives the transcript from the appellate court, these exceptions are missing, and Johnson never says another word about them. The often told story tells us that these exceptions were lost and unknown. Although they were lost, it was easy to surmise what some of them were, through close examination of the transcript and corresponding elements of the often told story. However, sometime prior to December 8th, Judge Richardson reads the transcript, which includes the attached indictment and affidavits. Due to some sloppy editing, Judge Richardson realizes that something is wrong with the transcript. We believe that he, like us, realizes that Jane Mullins, star witness for the prosecution, likely perjured herself on the witness stand. What's more, he also realizes that part of her testimony is missing. He notices this, and it appears that, on redirect, she answers questions in rebuttal to questions asked by the defense. But there is no recorded answer for these defense questions. Then there are the affidavits, all 4 of which deal with the jury's examination and alteration of the suspected murder weapon. Yet, there is no registered complaint from the defense on this topic. There is also the affidavit of Ian Mills, who plainly says that he and at least one other juror based their verdict solely upon the examination of the rifle. This type of verdict would be solely circumstantial, yet this man is facing first-degree murder and execution, and, again, there is no recorded exception from the defense. The now missing newspaper. Judge Richardson issues a last-minute stay of execution on December 8, 1892, based upon his examination of the transcript of the trial. On Thursday, June 29, 1893, the Big Stone Gap Post ran a jailhouse interview with Dr. Taylor, which first appeared in the Lynchburg News on the 25th or 26th of that same week. Note, we are no longer able to locate digitized copies of the Lynchburg News. There are several possibilities for this that we shall post on the website. From what is said in the interview, it is apparent that neither the reporter nor Dr. Taylor knew any details from the appellate hearing, which had occurred on Thursday or Friday of the previous week. Taylor states that there were several key points of evidence that assuredly would result in a new trial. This, of course, was a protracted statement of evidence that he had given in another interview earlier that year. On July 6, 1893, the decisions of several Supreme Court cases are given. The court reporter, W. F. Barnett, thoroughly reports on each case. For instance, when reporting on the Tilley case, he states that the judgment was reversed, gives a brief description of what Tilley was accused of, and states the reason for the ruling was reversed as, quote, there was no direct evidence, unquote. But on the Taylor trial, the only statement from the court is that the lower court decision is affirmed by Fauntleroy and that Richardson dissented. The reporter is forced to fall back on previous reporting on the case as nothing else had been issued by the court. Again, although we have no evidence for our opinion, we believe that this is because there was no appellate court hearing of the case. We believe this was not because of what had been said, but more because of what was not said. Following the appellate court's ruling, we find that no further interviews of anyone from this case until decades later. In fact, until Charles A. Johnson published A Narrative History of Wise County, Virginia, very little information about the Pound Gap Massacre had found its way into print of any kind. There was no interview with John or Jane Mullins following the verdict. There was no interviews with Dr. Taylor's defense team. There were no interviews following the capture of Heenan Fleming, nor the subsequent murder of Jane Mullins or following the charges being dropped against Heenan. There were no interviews following the charges being dropped against Henry Adams in 1901. But there were well-documented cover-ups that provoked us into investigating the Pound Gap Massacre. Our final evidence that there was no hearing by the appellate court case comes from Charles Johnson. Although Johnson states that there was a hearing and it had been well argued by the defense and the prosecution, he prints no evidence for his statement. But he does ask a critical question about the appellate court. He asks, quote, "Was the action of the Supreme Court of Appeals in refusing the prisoner a new trial and affirming the judgment of the lower court sound and beyond criticism?" Unquote. He then fails to produce a transcript from the appellate court. He tells us that he had to request a copy of the local trial transcript from the appellate court because no copy could be found in the Wise County court records. Going to all the trouble to find a transcript at the appellate court, why would he not also request a transcript of the appellate hearing? In a future video, we will discuss how a theatrical production was on display for everyone when it came to the last days of Dr. Taylor. How his faith and the rumors surrounding him as a mystical person played easily into the hands of this piece of theater. And we will delve into the obvious question that has been over the case for 132 years. Did Dr. Taylor really go to the gallows, or did he have help and escape? Thank you. We at Kentucky, Tennessee Living would like to thank you for watching our video series on the Killing Rock, otherwise known as the Pound Gap Massacre. Don't forget to hit that like button, as the more likes we receive, the more likely YouTube is to suggest our videos to other viewers. Also, to receive notice when we upload a new video, be sure to subscribe and click the bell notification button. Be sure to double check that you are subscribed, as some of our viewers are finding that they are no longer subscribed to our channel. We thank you for continuing to support Kentucky, Tennessee Living as we are discovering the mysteries in Appalachian history.